From Mary Shelley's Frankenstein to the Lucas and Roddenberry franchises, the Martian Chronicles, and beyond, science fiction is undeniably a part of our culture. But what exactly is science fiction? And how do you write a science fiction novel? This series will attempt to answer those questions.
Here we are, back in studio with Adam and without Kate. But we've got a new background, and I'm taking the top-down approach as usual. Adam's a little feng shui and a warrior class behind him.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm not going to say feng shui because that was either your daughter's or your daughter's friends.
This one is
abstract art or something, wasn't it?
Yeah. It looks like outer space. So yeah, there's other people see underwater, but I guess that's why it's art. So.
Yeah. What do you think about art, Adam?
You know, I grew up in a family where math and science was like paramount. You know, the arts were always secondary, although I did take a lot of piano growing up. But what made me really think about it, ironically, was, you know, the show Daredevil?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And the Kingpin has a white painting that he just loves and he stares at all the time. It's just white. That's it. It's like this is a snowstorm. And he just talks about how it makes you feel and how art is not important, like what is on the canvas. It's what does it make you feel when you look at it. And that's the first time anyone had said that to me. I was like, oh, of course, right? So I get it now. I get it why a blank canvas could be very powerful for someone who, you know, and then they go into his backstory and stuff. But
I like that idea. It's like the fundamental substrate, the beginning point is some sort of emotional response to the sense perception, right? I mean, that's all we're really saying, isn't it?
Yeah, and like I don't really think writing's that much different if we follow that thread a little bit, right? You're painting a picture for someone to inspire an emotion, right? If I'm feeling like I want to feel love, I'm going to seek out books, maybe with romance in it or something, right? If I'm feeling like inspiration, maybe it's an underdog story. If I want to just like let my imagination run wild, then maybe I'm, you know, sci-fi or fantasy or whatever, right? If I want to be inquisitive, mystery, you know, and then you can have these ridiculous characters go through these plot lines in these scenarios, and you know, it's just magic, I think.
I like that. I mean, I don't know if I want to be the party pooper on that, but as the philosopher that spends so much time in an ancient Greek tradition, I think of it as a fragmentation of something that makes humans human, right? So if you're reading a classic and there's something that makes this classic, it's probably going to be something that we all can relate to. You know how the Greeks were very much about universals, right? And then I want to ask you as a mathematician about the beauty and the artistic arrangement of numbers and how that kind of comes, you know, there's got to be a feeling for that when your big, long equation, you know, somehow just works itself out. So come there back in a sec. The idea is that, you know, this beginning in the Greek sense of art and what it actually means to move towards some sort of perfected ideal, and can see that in stark contrast to, we can go to a bookstore and say, well, yeah, I want a story about this, or I want a story about that, or I want a story about this. Like, have we commoditized it in a way, right? And you know, as you project this into the future of what science fiction is really, really about, is that, are we looking at further fragmentation or a pullback and a focus back at something that maybe, you know, more of like a cultural origin story, right? Like, you know, what is the psychology of the people in the dominant zeitgeist or influence on culture? These are the things that I want to, as a reader, be able to understand, like when I'm reading the book, right? I want to be like, oh yeah, I can see there's a definite psychological difference there, or how is it shifted? You know, how is the paradigm slightly different because you're imagining it X number of of years into the future. What's your thought on that rumble of a? It's not even a question, was it? It was like I just kind of threw up all over you, right?
Yeah, no, I got it. No, for me, I love the psychology piece, right? For me, the difference between a good story and a great story is that psychological piece of it, right? Like you went along the journey and you got to the end and it made you think in a different way. Doesn't matter if it's a thriller or it's a whatever. Like there's this one story, it's a short story called The Painted Door. And we did it in like grade 11 English class. And it wasn't very long, but all it was this woman was there was a snowstorm. And, it was like her husband, I think it was probably like horse and buggy era. Her husband had left to go into town or whatever. Snowstorm rolled in. There's no way he would have come back. It would have been suicide to come back to the snowstorm. And this other man had stopped in before the snowstorm hit, and she's feeling tempted to cheat with this other man. Okay. And the whole thing is her inner monologue on like, I shouldn't do it. And then she eventually justifies herself like, well, her husband will never come home. She'll never know, blah, blah, blah. So she cheats on him. And then in the morning, the snowstorm's over. She opens the door. She like pushes the snow out.
You read this in grade 3?
Grade 11, like English class.
Okay, just check it.
Yeah.
Grade 11, but still, it's obviously,
right? It left such an impact on me.
You're introducing, unfaithfulness in a marriage, right? It's like, well, that's really...
But this, hold on, this is the impactful part, right?
Okay, yeah.
It wasn't the unfaithfulness. So she opens the door. There's no track. It's all blown over. So, phew, she's, her husband never came home. He'll never know. She feels guilty now. The door closes behind her and she turns, and they had painted the door that day before the snowstorm. So the paint was wet and it was a red door, and there's a handprint on the door. So her husband came home in the middle of the night, or in the middle at some point, opened the door, saw it, closed it, left.
Oh, yeah.
And that story just like punched me in the face. So I was like, wow, is he alive? Is he dead? Did she ruin her marriage? Did she just ruin her life? And what an impact, right?
Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
So I was like burned into my soul, that hand on the door. I was like, that just, wow, So if you're going to write a story, to me, the good difference between a good and a great, whether it's a novel or a novella or short story or whatever, is that impact, right? That that piece, And
I would think, you're testing the water with the muses swimming around you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And likewise. Right. And I don't think I'm going to hazard a guess. Let me tell me if you relate to this, if this is kind of similar to how you're feeling about this. Maybe I'm a little further. I'm further down the road in terms of in writing. Right. My novel's pretty much written, but I don't really approach it from the standpoint that I need to find the white door aha moment. Sometimes I'm writing and it develops and shapes and forms into something, a gift as amazing like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Other times it may not, right? And do you find the same thing, like, mentally when you're writing this book? And I could ask Kate the same question. I mean, is there some sort of real hook, moral lesson that you're trying to build around as an epicenter, or are you just kind of letting it unfold?
I think we have a theme, and we kind of storyboard it out. Like, I think we want this to happen, and then I think I want this to happen, and then I have no idea really about the ending, but we'll leave that for now. But you're right.
Like, there's no white door ending yet, right? There's no
No, I don't know exactly
bow on it, right?
But
it might emerge.
Right? Like the perfect is the opening sequence is this dream sequence, right? Where I was trying to show like some kind of chaos going on, and I knew I wanted it to be kind of crazy and visually intense, but I had no idea until I wrote it that it was going to turn into this like Inception style craziness, right? So I would say, no, I don't really have much idea when I start writing. I just kind of let it go. And we just had a situation right now where like I've written and it's starting to overlap where Caitlin started, and we've got similar things happening, but in very different ways in very different scenes. Now we're like, okay, well, let's bring them back in and figure out how can I combine what she wrote with what I wrote in a way that's congruent, because my mind is taking me on a slightly different path than her mind, right?
You know what I thought? I get all these flip-flop ideas about how to structure and write something, right? Okay. Mm-hmm. So if your book, I was thinking, just now is like, what if the aha moment, it's kind of a spoiler alert, like if Adam's like, that's an amazing idea, let's do that. Yeah. Right? But so you get to the end of the novel and you've written everything in kind of like a double check safety mode to say that when they're awake, they're actually in a dream state. And when they're awake, it's like it's reverse, right? Mm-hmm. So, think about how we operate. Our rational cognitive selves are awake and alert, and that's the point when we're conscious, right? Okay. But what if history was made the other way, where it was actually while you were sleeping? Mm-hmm. Like that was where our relationships or our being was substantiated. That was kind of like the focal point of our conscious experience was actually in a sleep dream state.
So
where I'm going with this from a science fiction standpoint is imagine, and it could be the question, is it like a subtle coercive thing that the government does, or it's a way so that we're not like internally destructive to ourselves or the environment? You're better off, you're better off sleeping as opposed to whatever you're doing, right? Just you're like better off in this. Why create a virtual world when we have the whole mechanism right in here, right?
It was like the brain in the vat, right? Doesn't matter. Do we care? And in our scenario, and there's got to be at some point extremists that just live in the metaverse and just let their bodies wither away, or that do just have their brains pulled out or whatever. But I saw this interview with Keanu Reeves. It was just came across my feed last week, and he's talking about The Matrix, when The Matrix first came out. It was a recent interview, probably for the new one that came out. Anyway, but he's like, he was somewhere and this little girl recognized him, but hadn't seen the movie, and asked what it was about. And he said, well, it's about, imagine if, the world around you wasn't real. In fact, you were sleeping, and, you didn't know the real world. And the little girl was like, why would I care? He could not explain to her why it mattered, this real or that real or whatever. And, to your point, like, philosophically speaking, does it matter? If all this turns out to be a simulation.
Well, I was thinking a way that could be like a cool backstory or building around the conscious sleep state, right? Would be the voice from the architects or the programmers, or why this is being done. And you got to imagine, like, so what are some of the shortfalls with dreaming and dream states? Well, the fact is that you may not recognize things, or you may not start in a similar situation or surrounding. But the induced dream states that can come to us from our employers, right, are ones that always have us start and wake up in a regular sort of like ritualistic routine that gets us on our daily path, right? So imagine the horror of making that is how you experience things, very much in the head, to then having to wake up and then find yourself in this like outside of the protective walls, so to speak, that Kate's talked about, right? Mm-hmm. Healthcare and all this sort of stuff. You're now outside of that. You're like atrophied. You're like, you're living in a sleep state, or you're living in a wake state, which is primordial, like what it actually means to be a hunter-gatherer again, right?
Well, that could be really interesting. Let's just follow that thread for a sec. Imagine if plugging into the system made you feel euphoric when you behaved in certain ways. So when you got a job and you followed the line that society wanted, and when you contributed and whatever, it just made you feel happy about that. So, and everyone's just trying to be happy all the time. You unplug. No, all of a sudden I feel terrible. Why? I don't know. I didn't sleep, or my arm hurts, or, I stubbed my toe. Now you're responsible for your own happiness. Imagine how
You don't understand, man. These are such big philosophical themes, man. Like, they're huge. They're just absolutely huge. And you're like, tickling the checkbox there, right?
Totally. You can follow each one of those. Could be a whole story, right? What does it mean to be human? Like, these are not small questions. We started off to make a book to make a statement about business, which is what we do, but ultimately we're making a statement about humanity, I think.
I think the thing is, Adam, let's really roll with this and I want you to convey the excitement to Kate.
Okay.
It's an odd day for that, considering the context, but use your better judgment of when to be able to bring up the conversation and the point that I'm about to make. So when I'm asking these types of things, I don't want the listener and the viewer experience. I don't want it to be, I should, like Adam says, I should answer truthfully, or this is the way it's going to be. We want to actually give the audience an interesting experience in this. The book is being written, right? Okay. And there's going to be different things that are thrown out, different ideas. And that's part of the process of pulling people in, because you're experiencing what we're experiencing. We don't know whether we should roll it out this way. We don't know whether we should. Well, okay. So ultimately, they're going to have to buy the book, right? They're going to be like, oh, yes, that's right. He did it this way. Oh, Kate decided to do that. Oh, that's interesting, because I remember the episode when, type of thing. So I like that kind of like, sure, let's play with it, but we don't know what gets written because there's only one string and there's one book. So you can't have all these different multiples, right?
No, I why not? It's play, right? It's a creative process.
And then keep them guessing. Are we going to do this? Or are they going to be awake? Are they going to be asleep? Are they going to be, what is the government going to look like? Is it a world government? Is it a local government? Do we have, is this post-nuclear?
What are the conspiracy theories of the future, right?
Well, if it's in a dream state, can you imagine how much like wacky conspiracy theories there would be? Like, they'll be yearning for the days of like back when it was only UFOs. And
oh, you gave me a cool idea.
Yeah, that's what I did,
man. In our story, our character gets punted from the system, right? He's got to go through his, rehab to get kind of allowed back in. What if he breaks back in? But the warning is, hey, because you're kind of breaking in through a back door and you're not being let in. So all the protocols and stuff that like allow you to be very lucid in this state or whatever are kind of gone. So it's going to feel more like a dream if you break it. You've still got to accomplish something, but now it's going to be less like you kind of like in control of your horizon and being more like a dream when you're, you've got to remember that you're in a dream and then, oh, I can fly. And like, that might be kind of cool.
I love it. I think it's great. You could have, what if it was like a revealing of the architecture and the rules, right? So somewhat similar to free will. Mm-hmm. I don't want to go deep down this rabbit hole, but there's a very strong side of free will and there's a side of non-free will. The book that I wrote was really people are talking past each other. It doesn't really matter in one respect. And the other respect is that we still function in the world. We can call that whatever we want to call it, really. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's kind of a cop-out, but it just is like a redundant conversation. And there's a real strong religious undertone to the idea and the concept of free will. And then there's a real deterministic side that does a lot of things to really undermine the conversations about justice. And this is, I think, fundamentally why we haven't been able to reform the justice system. We're just, we're too entrenched in something that's so foundational and fundamental philosophically. And some of the language needs to kind of be like torn up and like turned over sort of thing, right? So I guess my point on this is that when I think about somebody kind of breaking in through the back door, what if they could understand that, oh, now, there's this architecture, this framework that is actually manipulating me, right? Which kind of feels unfair in a way, right? Mm-hmm. Like, and one of the ones that doesn't display the unfairness, but is a little bit actually like complimentary, is something hopefully you can relate to, is that if you notice maybe something that you're doing like your dad or your mom, right? Like a characteristic that maybe your parents have where you have 50% of their genes, and you realize as you're starting to get older, you're like, oh yeah, my mom did that a lot. And, I want to really stress that kind of thing, because I was adopted. I don't know if I've never told anybody on the air. I mean, I'm very open with it, but I was adopted. So I didn't know I grew up, I didn't know my biological parents until I was 21. And I've never met my father. So I just met my mother. And mannerisms, the way she walks, the way, like, there's things that, and we've heard this before too with twin studies, like there's things that our genetics do to kind of move us like puppets, behavior wise and physically. And some of the most remarkable things, you'd be like, wow, I didn't know I didn't have the degree of freedom that I thought I did. Right. And it was especially more apparent for me because I wasn't like in the stream of like just falling into the relatives, because a big extended family, but it wasn't blood related. And I'm from the same town you are, right? Calgary. So, what are your thoughts about that?
Well, it's really interesting, right? It makes a powerful statement when you're able to contrast something, right? So you're able to talk about your parents who raised you, that you spent, a large part of your life living with, looking up to, and then you meet your biological mother and she has the same mannerism as you, even though you've never really interacted. So its comparison is powerful. I don't know. It's kind of like, even right now when we go online, social media follows us and knows what we like to click and look on. So it feeds us ads about stuff that we're probably going to buy. So we're without knowing it, we're kind of used to a curated experience. So if you were to one day sign in, I don't know, under a different user account with a incognito browser or something, would you notice how much different the experience was? And then imagine taking that, into the future and immersive, like imagine playing into the system where it wasn't constantly manipulating you, right? Would you be like,
yeah, there's a lot of overlap. There's a lot of overlap there, Adam, for sure, with what I'm doing on the P of X book.
Cool.
Because the P of X, it meant for probability, big data, determinism, and I wasn't writing it to advocate for it, although I am an advocate of technology. What I'm saying is there's an opportunity, rather than to say, ooh, evil technology, look at ways that we can free ourselves from it, or be aware that these things are happening. So you need special advocacy groups, people that draw attention to, what does it mean that we're collecting data on something? Because we've become oblivious to it when we go to websites and it's like this cookie policy, you're just clicking it to get it away. It's almost like a subtle form of torture, right? I mean, they've proven that if you're in a situation where you're being tortured, right? Good thing, Kate's not here, right? Just like, maybe she doesn't want to talk about torture, right? But I mean, a couple dudes talking about being tortured, right? And what do we say? Well, we say whatever the torturer wants us to say. Just make the pain. Eventually, we'll say whatever they want, like, and we could think there's something in me that I wouldn't, but I mean, what kind of a secret do I have that I would like?
Well, it doesn't matter. If they want you to say a lie, you'll say a lie, right? At some point.
Yeah, you can't. You just so this is the thing that they've kind of proven with torturing. So not really effective, to say the least, right? And so you've got this, like this subtle form of really ineffective use of data, a rule, right? Here's cookie policy. Other thing is, if you want to go on a website, you agree to our terms and conditions. No, I don't. Well, then you don't go on. I don't agree to the terms and conditions of Facebook. You don't go on, right? It's our private playground. So for all anybody could know that the terms and conditions on my planksip site say that you give me your firstborn son and a hefty monthly salary of X number of dollars a year, a month, right?
Sure.
I know, and I'm not silly or stupid about this, but to say that, it's quite obvious that it would not be enforceable in a court, right? There's certain things you can't give away or demand and this kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm just poking fun at it to say you can't read this stuff.
Well, and the more online content that you develop and the bigger presence that you have, let's say your book, you sell it and it is a bestseller and you become famous, right? Now all of a sudden people might go back and watch all these things, and who knows, maybe somewhere along the way, a few years ago, you said something that might have been kind of funny and off color, but now is viewed as offensive, right?
Oh, shit. Yeah.
We've seen that happen, right? So,
yeah. Can I give you one that I had to back off of?
Sure.
This is a perfect one that you're talking about. I'm going to go back and go, see, he said that.
Yeah.
It has to do with the gender thing, right? I know there's something that you guys are talking about, themed about gender in your book as well, but the gender thing is it's very prominent, even LinkedIn and business, to put a bracket and say he, him, this
right.
kind of thing, right? And I've heard certain people, like, I don't really think it's a big deal. To me, it's not, it's fine. I mean, I'm okay with it, I guess, but I don't really know why, But anyways, so I thought it was funny if I put her/she/squirts in there, right? And I thought that would be.
You told me this before.
Yeah, and I thought that would be really funny. and I just, to me, it's just like, no, but okay, put this in a situation, because you know what, you don't want to like that. That's kind of a little risky. But say Joe Rogan did that.
Mm.
Would he be black? No, I mean, but there's something about Joe Rogan that could do that. And you could say there's certain things that certain people can get away with.
Yeah.
Why can they get away with it? Right? I mean, certain comedians can get away with certain things. Some,
I would say there's definitely doubles. There's no true standard, right? We hold each other up to, and then if you're in politics, it's even worse because, we demand that you be up here, and we look for ways to
pull you
not
down.
like you, right? So, yeah.
Yeah. Who wants to go up there? We're going to be pulling you down. But
yeah, exactly. Yeah, please let me work twice as hard for, to have everybody just tell me what a bad job they think I'm doing every day. Like,
just shit on me. Yeah.
Right.
Oh,
so.
Really interesting legislation. I think that came down from Canada for anybody on all the Canadian. We have an improvement to the social Medicare, and we have. I think it's being proposed that we can have our dental paid for too, basically, right?
Okay. I didn't hear that.
Yeah. It was this coalition between the Liberals, which Trudeau, and then also the New Democrats were the
NDP. Yeah.
NDP, yes, the NDP. Yeah, that's right.
What?
So, and of course, the Conservatives are like, "Oh, this is horrible," but. Mainly, their only issue is like, how are we going to pay for it? So this fiscal, how are we going to pay for things, right?
Sure.
Is the same, seems to be the issue. But there's not a fundamental ideology here that the healthcare system isn't valuable, right? And I know it's really valuable in your book. And is it because you're Canadian?
Maybe.
Someone will look at that and go, see, here's this. I don't know. You imagine it goes on the bookshelves and they're distributing it and they're like this socialist novel.
Well, that's interesting because, for us in the book, he gets kind of a warning. He's going to get kicked out of the healthcare system for not, following the guidelines. But that's true. As someone growing up in Canada, to not have universal healthcare to me is unthinkable. I've always had healthcare. To not have that would be terrible. But of course, down in the States, you have to buy your own healthcare insurance, right? So
it may be typical. Maybe it does scream Canadian. A
maybe.
Canadian science. Maybe we're defining the genre here.
That would be where I hope that someone like yourself or an editor would read that and be like, hey, listen, thematically, does this really make sense or whatever, right? To like challenge these notions. And I've been listening to David Baldacci's Mastermind, and he talks a lot about the editing process and the relationship between you and an editor, and that kind of thing. So it's pretty interesting.
I haven't struck gold with an editor yet. I think because there's so much commercialization around trying to hire somebody. Mm-hmm. But the next time I'm going to be very careful, and I'm going to focus on a relationship, because when I write, if I finally get it out, I want to run away from it. I don't want to think about it anymore. I don't want to do it. It was like, again, in ancient Greece, they talk about Socrates is rather like a midwife, kind of giving birth to ideas, right? So he's kind of the helping person so I've given birth to the bloody thing. I'm done with it. I don't want to look at it. I have to have a cool off period, kind of thing. And I'd rather pass it off to somebody else and let them deal with it, right? Mm-hmm. But that's not the way it works.
No, and
the first draft is like the first draft. It's like,
yeah, and he talks about going back, and he kind of shows some of his own notes, and he just tears his shit apart when he goes back and does it himself. And he's like, I actually really enjoy this process. This is my favorite part about it, because I go in there and there's some ideas there, and there's like, oh, here I'm on a soapbox. Like, no one needs me on my soapbox. Take that out. And he just like, to him, it seemed like his favorite part, where I'm like you, I'm very like goal. I got it done. Check. So it would be.
Well, I wonder about the impulse of sometimes going back and changing it, and the first one was better than the second one, because I have a hard time understanding, right?
And he does talk about that too. He's like, at some point, you gotta let it go.
Yeah, that's right. Just gotta let it go. You gotta let it go.
You gotta trust yourself a little bit.
You gotta let it go. I follow in the footsteps a little bit of the obscurantism. Like philosophy is probably the biggest opportunity to do that and get away with it, right? Because philosophers can write an entire system of approaching something, a total new invention in the way to think about something, right? Or describe. I think it's the other way around. They're trying to describe what reality is.
Okay.
And if they're describing it in a new and novel way, and it maps onto reality in a way that people can see and appreciate, or it provides some, value to the rest of the community, you can be valued as that, as a philosopher, to say, oh yeah, that's interesting. And this is a part of how he, Wittgenstein, on how he, wrote the Tractatus, or, Plato and his choice to use dialogue, right? It's like, I got to figure out a way to present this material. How am I going to do that? How am I going to present this material? And so the philosophical writing has the most flexibility in terms of being able to do that. I could write fiction. I could write a treatise. I could write, in a tradition of the moralists, and do something that was, I could do something in verse, like, and it begins to be a little bit of a pastiche back to the years past of previous writers. So again, you could actually do that within the genre of science fiction as well, right? Mm-hmm. But I think the clairvoyant next step, or big accomplishment worthy of patting everybody on the back, and to give everybody and all the listeners a bit of a summary as we wind up the show here. You guys are going to try your damnedest to get this written as a rough draft by the end of September. Is that correct?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And actually, it's too bad Caitlin's not here, because she, after our last episode, wrote a shitload.
Oh, good for Kate.
So
yes, that's great.
And you know what's really interesting? I haven't read it all yet. She wrote right after, like the next day. I don't know. She had a bunch of stuff happen. It was like work and kids and blah blah blah. She's feeling very emotional, so she wrote a paragraph, and I read it. It was amazing. It was really good.
Mm-hmm.
So her, like, and you could tell like her emotions like poured into her writing at that moment in time. I just found that really interesting. I could tell when I read it. I was like, oh man, she was like feeling very raw and like, so powerful stuff.
Needed it. It's like not capture the time, capture the emotion. You can't plan for the emotion.
Exactly.
So remember, she's like, I don't know what I'm doing wrong here. I've got all my plans. I got it this, and then when I sit, I'm just like, but it's like now she's like, oh fuck it, I got the emotion. Now I want to write, and then I got it out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. It's cool. It's a fun experience. That's why I like the mastermind class. The last thing I'll say is because I'm listening to it while I exercise, and it's keeping it top of mind. So. And all these authors have got like, Neil Gaiman versus David Baldacci. Their views are like very different, I would say, on how they view the world and how they write. So it's interesting. So.
All right. On that, do you have anything else you'd like to add, or do you want to just say adios to the listeners and until next week or next 2 weeks from now?
Until next time.
Until next time, guys. Thank you.
And beyond. Science fiction is undeniably a part of our culture. But what exactly is science fiction? And how do you write a science fiction novel? This series will attempt to answer those questions